Welcome to the Huffing Spirit Podcast, where we take you from the sacred to the profane, from the serious to the silly, from the outer to the inner, and from the guru back to you. Join your playful podcast guides, Alex Hindley and Natalie Dick, as they bring you back to a grounded and more authentic approach to spirituality.
Huffing Spirit Podcast, we're back.
Just Alex and I today. And it's been a long time since just Alex and I have jammed together. And before we hit the record button, we were like, damn, we missed this. We missed just us jamming about like awesome shit.
Yeah, I mean, we're back recording with both of us, but as it ties into what we're going to be talking about today, I feel like we're back from the other side of the fucking moon, from the dark side of the moon.
And I also think that the topic that we're talking about, which is going to be all about transitions, expansion and contraction, cycles of energy, has a lot to do with the expansion of this podcast too.
Yes, I would definitely be so egotistical to say as our podcast is
I don't mean the
galactically
expansion that I don't mean that our podcast is big. I just mean that we're being seen in ways on a podcast that we've never been seen. We're showing up and doing and creating something that we've wanted to do for so long, and it's rolling along. Like, I'm gonna pat myself on the back right now. Like, I'm proud of us.
I am too. I mean, this is like, you know,
it's a lot back like 10 followers. We're doing us.
I love it, and I'm grateful to everybody who listens and everybody who comes on and shares their like experience of life, and it's been so enriching so far. And just, you know, like some of the friends and family that like listen and they say like really positive stuff, and that's just awesome.
Yeah, so this is like Alex and I coming back after recording a ton of sessions and interviewing people, having episodes with just the two of us, and this is the first time coming back, and we're like, we've been through some crunchy shit before this episode. And we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna delve into all the details of what has happened, but when there is expansion, contraction, cycles of energy, and when you're moving through transitions, it is crunchy as hell.
Yeah. So why are we talking about this?
Well, because we know that you, our listeners, are going through crunchy times too. And if we can kind of convey our experience and let you know that you're not alone in it, that it is hard to human right now. I think it's really hard. It is hard to human right now. So I think that if us kind of unpacking this and unraveling, you know, some of our own experiences in the last couple of months, we're hoping that you're going to get something out of this.
Yeah, exactly, for me as well too. I mean, you and I have both done a tremendous job of holding space for each other the last few months, where like shit just seems off, not between us, but just like with our own lives and the way that we're showing up, or something's going on, or there's a repeat story. And a while ago we were just like, yeah, it feels so crunchy. And now, you know, Natalie and I both kind of shifted in some ways, where, you know, I spent 14 hours on the mat doing Aikido the other week, and I've had friends be like, "Oh, you're back again. Good to see you." And you're like,
"Yeah,
oh, I was such an asshole before."
Yeah, and I think like I want to bring like can we normalize the fact that we're not these static human beings that are chasing bliss and happiness? Like, it is, like I said, it's hard to human, but like, and it's so interesting that we both went through this at the same time. And we both like literally snapped out of it within the last week or the last couple of days of getting on the podcast together. And we're like, oh my God, do you feel like a new human again? Because I do.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, cleaning off that placental goo, and I'm ready to fucking meet the world again.
Yeah, like, and I know that for me, when I go into these darker periods like these, and the best way that I can describe it, for me in my experience, like I feel like I get pulled into these really kind of lower frameworks of my mind, where I start to really experience like old programming, shit that I thought that I have moved through, stuff that I'm witnessing myself in it going, what the actual is happening right now? Because
Are you censoring yourself now?
what the fuck is actually, I am censoring myself. What the hell? Um, I'm witnessing myself in this, being pulled down into this dark space. And the cool thing is that I know I'm in it, right? I know I'm in it, but when you're in it, it's really uncomfortable when you think you know how to get out of it and you can't get out of it.
Yeah, and for me, I resonate with what you're saying. It feels like there's a part in the movie Snatch by Guy Ritchie where Brad Pitt's character gets uppercutted and he goes flying through the air and then he hits the mat, and as his body hits the mat, you see him underwater under the mat, and he's like swimming to get up to himself. Like he can see everything happening to himself on the mat. Like he's just laying there.
But he's sifting through all the subconscious bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the movie was going for that message, but like I loved. Well, I mean, we'll talk about that later. But that's how I felt at the time. Was just like you see yourself and you know you're in this different spot, like you said. You know you're in deep somewhere, and you hear yourself repeating the same story, going back to victim mentality a lot. To reinforce why you're not up on the mat anymore. And a big part for me is like the self-awareness of where is my focus, and is my focus like I would call it pointed focus, pointed awareness at one person where I'm like, no, this person's kind of fucking me over. And then I noticed that like if it's not that person, it's another person.
Yeah.
And if I can shift from pointed awareness to more of an expansive circular type awareness, that helps center me in that moment of like realizing like, oh, I've got a story activating.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I would say the whole month felt like I was in a deep story, and I teach this stuff, the body work. I was trying everything to get out of it, and that connection point to myself was really hard to find. Really,
Agreed.
truly hard to find. So, and I think that's the best way to describe it is when I am so deep in a story, you become unconscious of the fact that you're in a story. And then even though on some level you are aware that you're having a hard time, but the actual way in which you used to connect to yourself is not working. And that's when it can really feel like, holy shit, I don't know if I can get out of this. Like I'm so deep in this wound, so deep in this story, so deep in my own motherfucking shit. I don't know how to see a way out of this because nothing's working that worked before.
So that's why we're talking about this, because you and I had such a reaction to it where like we would message each other and we're like, hey, how are you doing right now? And again, like, this podcast is about
what's going on.
the podcast is about being grounded, right?
Yeah.
In spirituality, but like we couldn't ground. We were like, I was like, I could not. I'm not sensitive enough to be like, oh, my root chakra, but I'm starting to get more where I can feel a little bit of it. And now, like for like a month or two, my root chakra was just like offline. I was like, hey, where are you at? I felt disembalanced internally, where I was like, it was like somebody takes your center in Aikido, and I was like, I can't work out enough. I can't journal enough. I can't scream or shake my body enough to move or laugh enough. I mean, fuck.
Yeah.
I was laughing, but still, like, it just wasn't.
It wasn't cutting it. Yeah. And yeah, same. I'll share a bit personally about like what I was going through. I was replaying this old story that I could see myself playing the story out, and I was becoming victim to that story. Right? It's like something that I was, victimized by, I was allowing it to overpower me. And that is a very powerful energy. When you are allowing a story to overpower you, where you become the victim of it and you kind of reperpetuate it through your actions, and it's a really hard train of thought to get out of. Really, really hard train of thought.
Yes, and I am guilty of that as well too, where and it's all internal, right?
It's so internal, and it's like it's our own shit. Like we're doing it to ourselves.
Totally. But
That's the hardest thing, right? We're doing it to ourselves, and then you're just like, and you can't see yourself. You can't see yourself.
yeah, and you project it. You project it on your spouse, on your kid, or like other people.
Yeah.
It's just it's really needed, I think, just to talk about, because transition gets so crunchy, and I think for me, I felt like I was wearing an itchy sweater. That's have fun with that for our friends that have studied metaphor therapy. So like
Yeah.
I felt like I was wearing an itchy sweater, and there was like this like awkward, almost like being a teenager, where like I just can't wait to fucking
Get out.
grow into my next phase, right? And there
Yeah.
was a part of it where like it's so hard to accept it while you're there, and yet you need to forgive, accept, and surrender before you can move on, and yet you're so stuck in your victim story you can't let go of it to begin to accept it or surrender it.
It's literally like that's exactly it. And I can describe as a woman, when we go through our cycles um in our menstruation, it's that feeling when you put on a pair of jeans and you're like, nothing fucking fits. Like I I'm so uncomfortable in my skin. I want connection. I want to see people, but I don't want to fucking see people. It's like I want this, but I can't do that. It is like
Yes.
such contrasting feelings within you that it's like you want to crawl out of your skin, and you do not belong here at all.
Yes.
Right? So if you're listening to this, we see you. It is hard to human. And I want to say, like, I think that a lot of what we're seeing, like what I just said, like what in the collective Sam hell is going on? It's like there's so much, like the collective dumpster fire of what is happening in the world. It's pushing so much of our personal shadow, our density, our traumas, pushing it up to the surface so fast that it becomes this immobilizing experience. That's what I feel it is.
I can resonate with that, in the fact that like you start to feel powerless, you start to feel hopeless,
Well,
which increases the victim cycle.
yeah, and you start to look outside of the world and you start to see like what's happening, and you start to see like so much trauma on display, and then you sit within your body and you're like, how am I supposed to process this? And it's not even happening to me, what's happening out in the world, but like
Yeah.
I feel so helpless within myself, like that. And that feeling is nothing to run away from, right? That is a feeling that the majority of people will distract and do everything they can to not feel.
Well, and I might have been guilty of a little bit of that during that cyclical period as well, but there was like something where I felt like I was kind of being like everything to what you were saying, but the being ripped apart in some ways, where you're like, how much more of this can I endure? and what am I being pressure cooked for? Like, what is beyond this,
Like,
where it just feels like a flurry, like a storm of punches, and you're just like, I can't. How the fuck do I get out of this? What's going on? And for me,
initiation, please.
yeah, stop the initiation ride. Emergency.
I want to abort mission. I'm out.
I have puked and shit on myself on this ride. Why is it still going on?
It's like the only way I can get reprieve is by watching spiritual memes of people just going through hell, like being dragged behind a wagon. And I'm like, yep, that's me. Yep. And this awakening process is like fucking painful. It is so icky and uncomfortable, and nobody is immune to it.
Well, and for me, like, I went to some dark spots. I was like, how much longer? For fuck's sake, I'm not like a Jesus or like somebody who has really, really endured that much, but like, for me, it was just like asking these questions of like, what's the point of being on this spiritual path sometimes, where you're like, I know there's only more of this shit to come, and yet here I am, trying to take the hits as best as I can and do the work. And then there was some part of me too that I would even reflect and meditate and journey by myself, and it was like, I'm tired of doing this shit.
Totally. Yes.
Like there was some part of me that was just like, what, like, who fucking cares? Why are you doing this? Like, why are you doing this to yourself?
100%. And yeah, it's a wild, helpless feeling. And I forget where I was going to go, but it's going to come back. I was just thinking of something as you were talking, but yeah, it is a crunchy spot. Oh, it is. It's like the way that I can like explain kind of cycles of energy. It's like you have to experience chaos within you, right? And that is that in order for that reorganization of that new up leveling to come in. But when you're in it, when you're in that chaos, like I describe it as like, I don't even know who I am right now. And like that, like to that point where you're like, I don't even know why am I here? Like there have been so many times in the last month where I have looked at my life and I'm like, should I just like throw everything in the garbage? Like everything that I've ever done in my work, like, should I even be a healer? Like, literally questioning every single thing in my life, every single thing. It is the most destabilizing energy. But at the same time, that is the energy that comes in that has to clear you out to bring in the new version of you. Not the new version, but like the more
the next layer, the next level.
The deeper, more real, authentic version of you, because you're shattering the old version. But when you're going through it, like it is seriously like you question everything. Like I questioned my work. I questioned like who I am. Like I questioned my values. Like I was like, why am I here on this planet? Like these deep questions that you're asking yourself, if you're listening on this podcast, you're not weird. You're not alone. You're not insane. It's a normal part of this awakening like experience. But damn, it was fucking hard when you get so blindsided with that energy and you're in a void essentially.
Yeah. And you're for me, I'm ready to become what I want to be, and yet there's that old called the ego, the old story. It's flaring up, it's kicking up, it's it's Custard's last stand for that egoic iteration.
Yeah.
And I just it was truly really hard for me. Like I just I felt disconnected from myself, and because I felt disconnected from myself, I felt inauthentic with everyone else I
Yeah.
was interacting with, where you're like, I just want to go squirrel away in darkness for a while, and also I just want to go watch fucking Lord of the Rings movies. Like,
Yeah, and I can feel that like when, and it's so interesting because Alex and I are very deeply attuned to each other and like what's happening, and we both supported each other incredibly in these dips. And I could feel when you were in that dark place, like I would just reach out, and you can't change when somebody's in that place. All you can do is kind of be on the outskirts of their situation and just say like, hey, I'm here. I see you and what you're going through, but I know it's rough. You can't change what somebody's going through. And it's, I can't stand the healers that think that you think you should change what they're going through. It
yeah.
is a personal experience, and you just have to be on the outskirts of that experience with a hand saying, I got you. Whatever you're going through, I see you, I got you.
Yeah, and our friend Evan said it best, where it's like, it's not for you to judge their ride, but
No.
if you're able to, maybe you get on the ride and you go with them, and you're like, hey, I can't experience what you're experiencing, but I can sit next to you in the process. And yeah, it's hard, right? You want to fix, and yet there's nothing to fix.
Nope.
And yet there are, like it's this interesting, contradiction.
Contrast. That's so much conflicting and contrasting emotions and feelings and energies within you.
I feel like the stuff that's going on in the planet right now,
Yeah.
is it is kind of like you're saying, everything's being bubbled to the surface, everything's coming up. But I really think, in the light of all of that, like, we're being called to still transcend and include, but also we're seeing all of this shit. So eventually we start to like rip the separation of you and me are different. And it's like, what is going on with you is going on within me. Is like, we're all feeling this, we're all in this together. And I think it's happening to show us like the points of separation are no more, are despite what people do with like fear mongering in politics, like all the shit's coming up to show us like we are one, we are connected.
Yeah.
The planet, we're connected to the planet, we're connected to each other.
The whole like inverted system of separation is crumbling, and that, I mean, it's gotta crumble. It's like we can no longer look at somebody else and say that you are separate from me. It is just, we're the same people going through the same thing, and like the world is a mirror to what is happening on the inside of us.
Yeah, and I do think, not to get too apocalyptic or whatever, but I think we're all being called to hold the light, to transcend and include, because like as Ken Wilber says with that theory of transcending and including, like you can't.
Do you want to explain what transcending and including is?
Yeah. So Ken Wilber, integral systems theory, he talks about everything being a holon. Everything has this like level of information, consciousness, development, truth, and that there's these rules to the holons that like the next holon has to include the one that came before it.
Right.
And so that everything builds off of these systems that are interconnected, and that there are no wrongs. There's just more truth, more stages of development, more understanding, more sides to the diamond, as I like to say. Perfect. So with that, he says that you have, if you want to spiritually evolve, my take on this is that you have to transcend and include. So you have to bring up the bottom holon with you, and you have to include it in what you're doing. And if you have to
include the shit.
You have to include the shit, you have to include the shadow, and you have to include the other that you are casting aside, saying, I'm better than you in this or that. Like, and until we are caring for the other as they are ourselves,
yeah,
right, we will not transcend and include, therefore we will not spiritually grow.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for explaining that, because our audience is like, what does that mean?
Yeah, sometimes I get high on my own like intellectual dick, and I'm like, oh, I know fancy things. I don't know if that's my dick energy or my head energy. There's a head involved.
Some.
So yeah.
Something's involved. Yeah, and I think that you're right. We are being called, and it's so funny because I recently just had a friend call me. Like I have a friend group here in my hometown, and friend called me, and he's just like, I don't know what is going on with me, but I am like going through ABC, and he's like, "Am I alone in this?" And I'm like, "No, you are not alone." And he's like, "Do you think that our other friends are going through this?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I think that the majority of people are walking around thinking they are alone in their struggles when they don't even realize. I think that the majority of humans are going through deep, deep layers right now.
Totally.
And they're not showing it and they're not sharing it, which understandably it's a very personal experience, but it made me feel like this poor guy who is a really good friend of mine. He's like, is anybody else going through this? And I'm like, oh, let me tell you, everybody is going through this. Like it's the awakening, and it's going to hit you at different levels. And it is like that transcendence that everybody is experiencing. And it's like what you just said, transcend and include, but it is being felt deeply on such a personal level for everybody. Like I don't know anybody who isn't going through it right now. Anybody. And maybe because I have that energy of everybody knows what I do. So I have that everyone feels very, very safe to share vulnerably with me. So everybody tells me that they're going through ABC and da 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 da. But I'm hoping this episode lands for people who are in it thinking that they're alone, because you're not.
No, not at all.
And those words have been a resounding safety net for me, because they were spoken to me over and over again by our mentor when I was going through deep shit, maybe 2019. Every time I thought that I was alone in my struggle, and those words, "You are not alone. You are not alone," was something that just felt so safe and warm to me. I was like, okay, I'm not alone in my struggle. And I want to make sure that anybody listening right now, that you're not going through this alone. The world is on fire and everybody is experiencing intense struggle within themselves.
Yeah, so we were talking about how some of our routines that normally ground us weren't necessarily working, and I'm wondering what practical advice we could give people where maybe they're experiencing that, and also like don't throw them away. It's might need a different method, or there's a different way of connecting. So don't discard them. It's just a tool, maybe there's a different tool.
So here's what I always notice, that I catch myself in that pattern of resistance is persistent, right? Even when you're in that really shit dark space where you're like, I don't even know who I am right now. Like and this has always helped me. This surrendering and acceptance piece of knowing, okay, I'm confused about everything in my life right now. I'm confused about who I am. Whatever your struggle is, that surrendering piece and the acceptance of where you're at and loving yourself in that confusing space, in that dark space, that has been the only saving grace when I'm in it, which then helps you move through it a bit quicker. It's the when you're so deep in it and you're resisting what is, like there's so much coming up. But at the same time, I see when it's so hard when you're in it, can't really see it. But when you can come to a place of like softness and surrender, where you are in the fucking cringiest part of your experience, like where you have the darkest thoughts and you can hold yourself in love in those moments, that is always the mega shifter.
So for me, I'll add to that with
Yeah.
acceptance and surrender. And I think a piece of that, I'm still learning self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
And Chin gave me a great framework for it as well too. And I've asked family members who are practicing Christians, I was like, some of them that have displayed forgiveness in a way, like my mother-in-law had this great example of it where like she had a weird tough with her brother, and then like a few months later, because she said some hard shit and mended the fence with her brother because she's like, our parents aren't going to be around for so long. And I said to her, I was like, wow, I'm really impressed by you because you put yourself aside to forgive your brother who, and I'm clearly on her side in the situation of what happened. But I said, you would get a great example for not only your kids, but your grandkids of showing them like what forgiveness is. And she kind of just brushed off. It's like, yeah, And so my question to them is like, how do you forgive? How do you start to do that and flex that muscle? And what I would tell people who are having trouble forgiving themselves or others is start small. Maybe you don't have to forgive the whole big bad thing, the story around it, but maybe you can forgive yourself or that other person for a piece of it. What is 1 or 2% concession of that? So, you might have a big thing that you're really hanging on to and you're holding on to, and you go, that still really hurts. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive that just yet. Well, maybe you could say, but I can forgive myself for judging myself for how I responded in that moment. I can forgive myself for the way that I showed up in that moment, or I can forgive them for the way that they showed up in that moment. And that little bit of breathing room might help with your acceptance and your surrender.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, like, or can you love the part of yourself that can't forgive right now?
Yeah, cool. I like that.
You know what I mean? Like, and I mean, I love internal family systems parts work because it's part of what I teach and what I practice all the time. There's a part of you that can't forget. So can you love hard on the part of you? Like hold that part of you and say, I love you, even though you can't forgive. I'm going to love you until you can forgive.
Okay, so let me ask a harder question too then.
I love it. Now that we're on the other side of our darkness, we have all these solutions.
We're so fucking advanced and wise.
We're not.
As I'm saying this, Spirit's like getting ready to kick me in the balls again. Like, get ready for another one, buddy.
Get ready for your next dark deep dive.
Spirit let me out of the shed just to see the light of day, and I was like, oh, the sun exists. I was like, get the fuck back in there. Feeding me Skittles and water.
Go too soon.
Shut up, bitch. Just kicks you in the ass. So I don't know where the fuck I was going with that. But okay. How do you love the heart? Because you're like, oh, just love that part of you that doesn't forgive people. And the part of me that's really hard on the journey sometimes is as you expand your light, you expand your darkness, and you discover, you're a full spectrum being, and darkness isn't necessarily bad, and light's not always good. As we kind of make fun of some of the spiritual people sometimes. That's a small example, like the part of yourself that you can't forgive, loving that. I have trouble loving the monster that's like ugly and nasty, and you're like, oh, that's part of me. Yeah, I love you. Like how that's really, really hard for me. So do you have any solutions for that?
Yeah, so that's deep shadow, right? Like that's
okay.
Yeah, that's like the cringy part of yourself where you're like, you want to avoid at all costs, like that. So I have a little practice, like I call it like shadow swapping. And
shadow swapping, like you're You go to like a swingers party where you're swapping shadows with somebody?
No, swamping.
Oh.
Swamping. Like swamp. It's like the fucking nastiest, cringy, grossest parts of yourself, right? And I have a practice where I invite that shadow aspect of me, like I don't want to divulge some of my darkest secrets, but a part of me that I am maybe ashamed of. Like shame holds such a big charge, right? Like maybe it's like a sexual component, maybe it holds shame, but maybe there's a shadow part of you. And what I do and what I teach is I will get in front of the mirror and I will allow that shadowy part of myself, the one that I hate, that I cringe at, that I'm ashamed of, that I'm embarrassed of, and I will let her come through and I will embody her and I will let her move through me. Okay. And what I feel is that when I allow that grossest, cringiest part to move through me energetically, and I witness myself in that, I am accepting her. I'm accepting that piece. And let me tell you, it is fucking ugly. It is like you get in front of the mirror and you let this shadow, disgusting energy move through you and you swamp it out. And you become the grossest part of yourself that you are so afraid to look at. When you let that in and you embody it and you let that energy move through you, there is no longer a charge. So it is a fear, like it is like a deep fear that you are so afraid to face, that you let it come through your body and you look at it face to face in the mirror. It's no longer in the shadows.
Well, that's powerful. Thank you.
It's fucking scary and it's swampy and cringy and grody, gross, but I'm telling you, that charge that is behind you, it's kind of pushing you, and it wants your attention, right? So that is the part. It takes a lot of courage, and I have a lot of clients that when they do it, they're just like, holy shit, I don't know if I can do that. But when you do it and you see the gnarliness in you, like say you have a fear of aging as a woman. That is a big fucking fear that women face. That is a collective fear that is deeply imprinted, that we become worthless and useless. And as soon as you hit menopause, like all of these stories. So as a woman, one of our biggest fears that we have, all women carry, is to age, because we carry that imprint that we are useless and that we're discarded, banned from society, right? So when you look at yourself in the mirror and you allow that aged woman to come through you, and I've personally done this because I have a fear of aging. We all do, right? I've allowed the dark crone energy to come through me, and I have swamped the shit out of myself in front of the mirror and letting myself look horrible, look scary as fuck. And then I'm not afraid of her anymore. I'm like, oh, there she is. She brought her into the light, brought her in front of the mirror, brought the whole shadow gang in front of the mirror so that we can all have a party, right? Really hard to get to that place. And I would not recommend doing deep shadow work unless you've done nervous system work. Because when you
a great recommendation as well. Yes. So
because it's intense shit when you are in front of the mirror and you are letting that energy move through you and you're witnessing. It's ugly and it's powerful, but it's fucking beautiful. It's so amazing. Once you move through that completion of it, you're like, okay, I'm not so, why is that? It's not so scary anymore, because it's not in the back end. And it's not like all my fears of aging have disappeared, but I've faced some of it.
Well, yeah, and I love what you're saying, and also like the reminder of go at your own pace. don't rush your own healing journey. And I talk to some people like, oh, I'm listening to Yogananda right now, and I'm reading A Course of Miracles, and I'm doing this and that. And you're like, that's cool, that's rad. Let's take it a step at a time. Don't pull a hammy on your spiritual marathon.
Yes.
As somebody who's, you know, rehabbed a bunch of hamstrings. But I love the power of what you're saying, because in a dream interpretation, I've heard other people say the same thing too. If you have a dream, try interpreting and embodying that and allowing that energy to go through, and then your dream will be speaking to you in a different level that you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I will say, like, when you're in it, you always forget to do the shadow swapping, the shit that helps you. Like, I feel like I know all the tools. I've practiced all the tools. I teach this stuff. But sometimes you can't get to it. And you're meant to sit in it. You're meant to sit in it. And it is fucking gnarly. It is so uncomfortable.
Sucks.
But there are ways, like, I mean, there are ways to move through it, but sometimes you just hit that wall where you can't, the shadow work in the mirror, like the shadow swamping isn't going to work. The shaking and the nervous system, like all of that, all the tools that we have in our toolbox. Sometimes
and
doesn't
forgive
work.
yourself for being there. Like, it's okay. You know, like you're talking to a small kid, like, it's okay.
And that's where I will say the biggest movement out of that discomfort is when you can love yourself in the discomfort. It is holding yourself in the darkest part where you're like, literally, I have sat in front of the mirror with my arms around me, bawling my eyes out, holding myself, being like, God, I don't know where you are. Feel like I'm fucking dying. Like, literally calling out for help so bad. And I'm sitting there and I'm holding myself and I'm like, okay, I'm like rocking back and forth. Like, it is that intense. That intense.
And one thing I love about you is, like, you are
people listening to this are like, she's cray.
Well, you're crazy in the fucking best way possible. And I'm tremendously proud to know you, because, like, you are committed to the work. And it's not just like when you're going through these times, like, you do this shit on a daily basis. Like, if more people did this, the level of awareness that they'd have, like, it's an honor to see you and to be seen by you, but also, like, to know the work that you do. And that's my big brag on you, is I'm like, and I'm doing this podcast with Natalie, and she's so fucking cool, and she's down to earth, and she does the fucking work.
Thank you. Sometimes I don't want to do the work, though. That's what gets us stuck, right?
Yeah.
Alex, thank you for I will receive that, and I'm grateful. And don't sit there and think that
you don't have to do it. You don't
tools. You're an amazing spirit and human being, and all around amazing podcast co-host. I love it.
Don't tell anyone, or tell everybody.
So in this crunchy transition that you are going through, A, you're not alone. B, everybody else is going through it in their own unique way. And I mean, yeah, there are the meditation. I used to meditate thinking that it would be, I don't know, I have kind of an aversion to meditation right now. I'm not going to lie. Like, it is, I love it, but it has been one of those things in the last probably 2 years that has done nothing for me.
I'm gonna sound like one of those typical internet guys. The Wim Hof breathing has been very productive for me, and the state that I get to experience after that.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy it. It's you gave me a helpful hint a while ago of, like, you're breathing through your nose on your in breath, but you're pulling in from your tailbone. That's helped me as well. And then the idea of expanding your stomach and your chest, like you're like a cylinder. There's a guy I started following, like Kitaro something, and he's got a great Wim Hof breakdown. It's super cool stuff. And it's 20 minutes. You're like, but it's important to try different things. I think it's important to keep laughing even when the shit is crunchy. Like maybe you need to watch a comedy special. Maybe you need to just get your mind off of it for a little bit too. Like,
and also I can also say, like, in my experience, because I'm a single mom, I'm kind of alone sometimes when I don't have my son. 50% of the time I'm alone. I live by myself. Go see people. Make sure that you connect with people. We are relational species, and if you spend too much time alone, this is like the downfall of Natalie Dick. If I spend too much time alone, guess what happens? I fall into the web of programming in my mind, and I fall deeper into the pit. Whereas if I get out and I see people and connect and hug people, my life is easier. So
don't deprive the world your big dick energy, Natalie.
Yeah, like, no, but I'm saying to our audience, like, don't do this alone. Like, get help. Go.
Yes.
If you don't have a safe space to talk about this stuff, like, find a practitioner. I mean, Alex and I are both practitioners. We're open and available, but like, or if you have a family member, just don't do it alone. That is what I will say is, I think one of humanity's biggest challenges right now is that people think they are alone in their feelings. That's a horrible thing to go through. To be alone in feelings is like one of the biggest detriments to yourself.
Yeah, it is very necessary. So find a therapist, find somebody that you just connect with, that gets you, that can like see, like hold you in that moment, but also see the goodness of who you are. There's men's groups, women's groups, spiritual communities, online forums, like it's
and because it is like when you're deep in it, it is when you don't have that output or that connection to somebody else, you will circulate in your own victimhood, and getting out of the house and just doing things to make you feel normal are very good for your being. When you are in this deep, dark period, get outside. And I will say, okay, here's another thing. Nature is powerful because everything in nature has a purpose. The tree is a tree. The tree isn't trying to be a frog. So when you go into nature, there is nothing more authentic than the mirror of nature. Nature will always mirror back to you the true authenticity of who you are, because nature's not trying to be anything. It's not trying to shapeshift or trying to change. It just is. So it has this natural co-regulating effect on our nervous system where we can start to feel like ourselves again. Nature has saved me so many times. How many times has nature saved you, Alex?
I'm still building my relationship.
Are you?
I know I'm getting into like grounding my feet a little bit more and more. We've got a few like nature-based trips coming up this year. So I think like the love affair is gonna, she'll go from being my side piece to moving in together type of thing.
Oh my God. I am like in my happy place. When I'm confused, distraught, overwhelmed, uninspired, just not feeling connected to myself, I will go for a hike. I will hug trees. I will literally soak up the energy of the trees. I don't know. I just feel so like nurtured when I'm in nature.
It's interesting you're saying the tree hugging thing. 5 Personality Patterns book by Kessler, I would highly recommend to every person. He talks about how like you could hug a tree and then you can just like one of the most, find one of the trees that you idolize the most and like hug it and just ask the tree, like, how do you ground? How do I ground?
Yeah. Trees are if you ever read any or listened to any documentary,
we're gonna be woo woo, and we're like, oh, go fucking hug a tree, and put
yeah,
some lipstick on,
there's some serious scientific studies about hugging trees now and what it does to your health. Like just grounding alone, but like trees hold so much energy, like negative ions.
Yeah, but where is that research coming from? Is it like big tree lobbying?
No, like it's, I know, right? There's so much scientific research on like study of energy, and it's out of the University of Virginia, but in mainstream science, it's mostly deemed pseudoscience, but it's it's all quantifiable. It's just mainstream.
There's been 20, 30 years of this data as well, too.
Yeah. No, but the University
maybe more so.
University of Virginia has a lot of data. There's I don't even know who the scientists are, but I don't know why that place has a lot of data on psychic phenomena, like just so much information. Anyway, I don't know how we're getting on this topic, but it's wild what is out there that the mainstream medium of information, just people can't access it, right?
I think we provided a lot of resources, a lot of tools in the toolkit. So yeah. I think it's time to figure out the homework, which I think I know what it is.
What is it?
I think we practice the forgiveness thing. We've talked about acceptance and surrender before, and find something that's bugging you, and how can you find something that's giving you resistance, where your energy is getting blocked. You find yourself talking about this person or this thing a lot, and what is a little bit of forgiveness you can give towards yourself and towards the other in that situation.
Perfect. I like it.
Yeah, I was like, it's about time I contributed to homework.
You're like, I'm so proud right now.
Dear Diary, I did it. Pat myself on the back.
All right. So again, let's reiterate to our listeners that like it's hard to human right now. You're not alone. Reach out if you need help. And we see you.
We see you. We hear you. We're with you.
And just know that your transition is a transition. It's not permanent. You're going to move through it.
Yeah. It makes me think of caterpillar becoming the butterfly, and as it's in chrysalis, there are all these imaginal cells that are knowing what it will become, and thousands that are dying off in that process. So your old you is fighting against the new you that is unfolding, and eventually the imaginal cells outnumber the caterpillar cells, and it goes into that process of chrysalis and then becoming the butterfly. So your ego is going to throw up some shit along the way.
It sure will.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So it's as you're coming into your new you, the old ego will put up a little bit of a fight. And you're a fucking strong warrior. You got this.
Hang in there, humans.
Hang in there, humans.
Hang in there, humans. It's a wild ride, and we see you and we support you.
And thank you for being on our journey with us. And if it resonates with you, send it to somebody you think resonates with them. We want to grow this.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Love you.
Love you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Huffing Spirit Podcast. Remember, you are your own teacher. Take what resonates and leave the rest. For more info, follow us on Instagram at Huffing Spirit Podcast and subscribe on Spotify or iTunes. Bye for now.